Round 8 of the London Chess Classic was very hard fought, but there was only one decisive game, which we're going to look at now. Anish Giri with the white pieces playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Now, the start of the game was pretty orthodox. It's a Reti system, and now we're transposing into the so-called King's Indian attack. Everything normal so far, rook e1, and now here Nakamura played Queen c7. You might recall that Svidler and Karyakin reached this position in the final of the World Cup, and Karyakin played b5, and then Svidler exchanged on d5. Not the normal way. The normal way is to push on with e5. And then after knight takes, well, a very complex game resulted, but Svidler won quite quickly. Now, something sort of similar happened today. First, Nakamura waited with Queen c7, so he's quite prepared to go in for this very sharp line where black attacks down the queen side and white attacks on the king side. But instead, Giri hesitated with e5. Well, hesitated is the wrong word, waited. Played Queen e2, so he still has this option. But after b5, he went for this Svidler plan of exchanging on d5. First of all, he threw in a4. Now, that's a clever move. Black doesn't want to exchange and isolate this pawn. b4 was played. And now Giri exchanged on d5. It means if knight takes d4, then the knight finds a square on c4. Very nice. You can see the point of playing a4. So, understandably, Nakamura recaptured with the pawn, just maintaining this nice pawn front. But you can see white's pieces pretty nicely placed here, and white's pieces are going to come out with tempo. At least this one does. Bishop f4, and whoops, I misfired with the bishop. Bishop f4. And those bishops look pretty tasty on these diagonals. So, around about this point, well, I thought Giri was doing pretty well. He's got a nice initiative. But I guess the question is what to do now. Because actually, well, there's a little bit of pressure on the e-file, but where are the weaknesses in black's position? Well, let's see how things develop. Bishop e6. Tricky move from Giri. a6. Could be that at some point he uses the a5 square. Could be that much, much later on the a7 pawn becomes a target. Watch that one. But for the time being, well, everything is fine. Although, optically, I rather like white's position, actually. Again, it's those bishops which look rather tasty. There is nothing wrong with black's position at all. There are no real weaknesses. Black threatens to exchange off knight for bishop. The queen ducks back, probably sensible, possibly avoiding rook a5, possibly avoiding some kind of hit with c4. And in fact, c4 is, well, probably a reasonable move in this position. Giri actually played c3. Now, if this is exchanged off, then the knight on b3 can't be captured because the queen is trapped. And it would be a mistake to open up the b file. It doesn't look right. So correctly, Nakamura played rook c8. Well, good idea, bringing the rook off this long diagonal, and, well, one never knows when the c file could open. So good move. And queen c2. And now d4. Excellent move from Nakamura. Again, perhaps looking to open the position some way, and particularly with the rook opposite the queen. d4 looks good. I suppose c4 is definitely worth considering. I was looking at this during the game. But after bishop f5, I thought that black was fine, because there are two targets. One is the pawn on d3 and one is the pawn on a6. Of course, this is quite a double-edged position with these bishops flying down the board, and maybe sometimes white can hop a knight in here or even a rook. But I feel that with a queen swinging across to g6, black must be fine in this position. Knight d2 is played. So hopping around looking at the c4 square, and after h6, well, white has to be careful. Could trap the bishop at some point, so h4 all looks pretty normal. And now Nakamura exchanged on c3. And here, well, this is starting to look really nice for black. Knight f6, I think, is a good move. The knight doesn't achieve much on d7. It's perhaps looking to come into d5, or maybe bishop d5. And this pawn on b4 has real potential, and it's very nicely supported through this diagonal by the bishop. I prefer black's position here to white's. But Nakamura made a very strange decision here. I mean, who knows what he was thinking. Giri said after the game he was really surprised. He exchanged on c3, and to my eyes this turns around the position completely. Well, you can see over the next few moves that black basically just starts going backwards. Knight c4, hitting the queen. Suddenly bishop b7 comes. Well, there's been a radical transformation in the position. Basically, white has the initiative. Doesn't mean he has the advantage, but white's pieces are simply more active than black's. Knight d5 from Nakamura. Hitting the queen. Well, obviously you don't want to give up this nice light square bishop, so the queen came back, and Nakamura grabbed one of the bishops. That's fair enough. And here he could have just slid to the side with rook b8, and probably everything is still okay for black. But instead he played more ambitiously. Queen takes d3. Excuse me just 1 second. Now it starts to get tricky. Nakamura is hoping that at some point Giri will give up that bishop, or, well, take the rook with the bishop, and then Nakamura will have two bishops and potentially a nice passed pawn here, and maybe chances to attack the king. But Giri played in a much cleverer way. He played, first of all, knight e5. Now, there are all kinds of tricks starting here based on the weakness of the pawn on f7. So it's important the queen steps back. And again, the rook is available. One can take this rook, but this was much stronger. Rook ad1, I think, more practical choice at any rate, because this keeps the pressure on black, but with no real risk to white. So here, of course, black could exchange queens, but then that knight on c6 is attacking the pawn on a7, and that is highly unpleasant for black. Remember, if that pawn disappears, then that a pawn, which whizzed up the board quite a few moves ago, suddenly turns into a real threat, particularly in combination with that beautiful light squared bishop. Nakamura now sacked his queen. He was convinced that he would be okay with the bishops, or maybe he just saw nothing better, I don't know. Now, if white doesn't get a handle on this position, then those bishops in combination with supporting that pawn, the bishops and rooks, and supporting that c-pawn, could be very dangerous. No real weaknesses in black's position, but in fact, at this point, Giri played a series of accurate moves, accurate, energetic moves that broke black's coordination. Let's see how he did it. First of all, queen a4. This was protected. Rook d8, excellent move. Of course, you want to trade rooks, and just, in trading rooks, then one of them is going to be more of a target. It's as simple as that. So obviously if that's taken, then queen takes, and of course there's another target in the position, the pawn on a7, And that's really what white is gunning for. So first of all he exchanged, and now rook takes bishop. This is crucial. You need to get rid of that bishop. And that means the queen can slide in, and here are the targets. All these highlighted points in black's position are targets. So for example, if the rook, well, I mean the rook can't really step away from protecting the pawn, it has to come up the board. Now take care, because if you take here too early then that pawn is going through. So queen e6 check, queen f7, okay, there's still targets to hit, so if you keep doing it with gain of tempo then everything's fine. So queen f7, I mean this just shows what a powerful piece the queen is. It just sniffs out weaknesses and attacks them. Bishop d6, such range it has. Now take care again, if queen takes a7 then c3, and that pawn is going home. But there is a way to win this. h5, great move. Again, it's targeting black's loose pieces, so there's a threat to check on g6, which will win the bishop on d6. Now the move that I would like to play with black is bishop c7, protected by the rook, and once again the threat is to push the c-pawn. Just for a moment it seems as though everything is fine, but white can win by force in this position, and this is really beautiful. It's really geometrical. First of all a check, another check, black can do nothing else, another check, another check. Then we take on c7, and that breaks black's position, because no time to play c3 because the rook is on. Great, love that variation. And if, well, let's say in this position c3, then yeah, well, we've seen this already, check, and you just take the bishop. So Nakamura tried rook g5, but, well, you can see that moving away from these pieces, it has to be hopeless. Prevents queen g6 check, but still. King g2 was a very cool move, just protecting g3, and f4 is then the threat. c3 played, and after f4 actually Nakamura resigned. Well, let's just see why. Well, first, well, rook a5, if the rook moves away, we'll take the bishop as per the other variation, and here's the really cute move. If c2, you take the rook, black makes the queen, g6 check, and mate on the back rank. Very sweet indeed. So, nice victory from Giri. What impressed me about this game was, at a certain point, his fantastic calculating ability, but also he had a very practical sense of how to create difficulties for his opponent. You know, that move knight c6, instead of taking an exchange, which might well be good for white, but still tricky to play, but knight c6, offering that ending and heading for the a7 pawn, gave black no counterplay. Very difficult move to meet. And yeah, brilliant calculation to finish off the game. So, after 8 rounds, with just 1 round to play, we have Anish Giri and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in joint first with 5 out of 8, and then 3 players behind them, half a point behind, Carlsen, Grishuk and Aronian. So any of those 5 players could still win the tournament. In the last round, Giri plays black against Anand. Aronian has white against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and Carlsen plays against Grishuk. So it's going to be a thrilling conclusion to the London Chess Classic 2015. If you want full details of this round, then do check out chessbase.com, where there's a detailed report. There were some very, very interesting games. Carlsen came very close to grinding down Topalov, but that's another story.